Conquest is in the Invincible TV show for an incredibly short period of time. Despite only being seen for one episode, he delivered what I think was undoubtedly the best episode of the third season, and potentially the whole show, being beaten out only maybe by the season 1 finale. The show also made an attempt to characterize him even more than he was in the comics, and I think that he is one of the greatest success stories of this show's writing, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Today, I'll look through the Conquest fight chronologically to show how it perfectly wraps up an amazing season of the show. For the entirety of season 3, there is one main plotline from the previous season that isn't followed up on, which is what Anissa told Mark. If he doesn't prepare Earth for Viltrum, then they'll do it themselves. This is sort of a looming threat for the entire season, but after the Invincible War, it seems as though we've already seen the climax of the main battle, all until that looming threat is suddenly looming right above Mark. Conquest's initial appearance is perfect, mostly because it comes right when you forget about Viltrum. It's been a few episodes since we've seen Nolan and Alan, and after all the chaos of the previous 2 episodes, this was the last thing that I was expecting as a viewer. His first lines are amazing and very well delivered. Conquest is immediately established as possibly the biggest threat we've seen up until this point, and he sounds extremely confident. Despite that, Mark doesn't hold back, and they begin their fight. Since Anissa, we haven't really seen Mark go all out against an opponent like a Viltrumite, and so we don't actually know whether he's going to get smoked here or not. As the fight begins, they honestly seem relatively evenly matched. I mean, at least Mark isn't getting stopped by singular punches. Although, our first hint towards Conquest's true personality is when he tells Mark how he's different from the other Viltrumites. While all the others we've met up until this point do what they do seemingly because they believe it's what's best for the universe, Conquest only acts the way he does because he enjoys it. He's a bloodthirsty masochist that only kills for love of the game. As Oliver gets involved, we see this even more, with him trying to split the boy in half. One part of the fight I really liked was Mark stopping to try to talk to Conquest, which obviously doesn't work. As Nolan taught him a season earlier, the Viltrumites are fighting to kill, and so Mark must battle in a similar way. But as we saw with Angstrom, there's still some hesitance with him about killing. With this in mind, I think that this moment was Mark confirming that there's no humanity in Conquest and no other way out of the situation. He has to win this fight, not only to survive, but for Oliver, his mom, and every other human on the planet. Throughout the entire fight, Conquest also maintains the same unbothered and cocky personality, which makes complete sense. The guy has been winning fights for millennia, so why would this be any different for him? The reason I bring it up is that it makes him super annoying to listen to. The other Viltrumites are insufferable as well, but that's in a different way. They talk about interplanetary colonialism like it's good for the universe, but Conquest simply wants genocide. This is further explored in a speech he has with Mark, which has since become famous. Before we get there, Eve joins the fight to hold Conquest off while Mark is injured. This part is nice, especially because it gives Eve some proper fighting, which she really needed. For a lot of this season, she's just been getting beat up, but here she actually manages to hold off Conquest while Mark recovers. Conquest still brutalizes her though, leaving Mark to pick up the pieces. As Mark goes to help Eve, Conquest comments about how the relationship they have is a weakness. Had it not been for Mark's love for Eve, he could have been getting the jump on Conquest right now, but instead, he lets his opponent recover. This line can't be truly appreciated until later, but I love how this gives us a glimpse into how Viltrumites see relationships. The idea that love is a weakness is something explored in the first season as well, with Nolan's care for his son preventing him from killing Mark, and subsequently taking over the planet. Now, while Steven Yeun has had some amazing lines throughout the course of the series, this one pierced my heart when I first heard it.
Cecil! I need you, Cecil!
The way he yells for Cecil's help is chilling. This whole season, almost from the start, has been about Mark distancing himself from Cecil. The rivalry is honestly a bit pitiful, with Mark getting childishly mad every time he sees Cecil, but all of that is dropped right here. Eve could die, and Conquest is coming to finish the job. This is no time for him to be holding a grudge, and so he yells for Cecil, knowing that he's watching the fight. He admits that he needs Cecil, that he truly can't do it all alone. Despite what a lot of people think, I don't think Mark picked the name Invincible because he is literally unkillable. Rather, I think he picked it because it represents his spirit. It's unbreakable, and that's shown in this scene, where with his girlfriend on her final breath and the weight of the world on his shoulders, he tells Conquest that he won't live to see tomorrow, and the fight resumes. Mark's determination is shown when he shatters his own arm to break Conquest's, enduring the pain of losing an arm to continue fighting with the one that he has left. Conquest's barbaric nature is also beginning to rub off on Mark, shown when he takes a bite out of his shoulder mid-battle. The tables begin turning in Mark's favor when he has Conquest pinned to the ground, but still, Mark's down an arm and is way less strong and durable than Conquest. As Conquest overpowers Mark, he tells him his biggest secret. Conquest talks about how he's lonely, how none of the other Viltrumites want to be friends with him, and how they see him as essentially only a weapon. He calls himself a victim of his own success. This is a scene only in the show, and something that adds so much to Conquest as a villain. Besides Nolan, it's by far the most backstory we've seen on a Viltrumite, and it's an interesting glimpse into the fact that they still kind of have emotions. Conquest even goes as far as to say that he feels like he wants to cry. Part of the reason he sees the relationship Mark and Eve have as weak is because he doesn't have that with anybody, and so he sees it as nothing but a distraction. As one of the strongest people of his species, Conquest has developed a hedonistic view of the world, and by that I mean that he has lost the sense of living beings and everyone other than himself. He lives only to serve his own desire for murder and committing atrocities. This reminds me of the quote, "Absolute power corrupts absolutely," and Conquest's simultaneous desire for relationships, but also a disgust for them, shows how he idealizes power above everything. It's the same thing Nolan experienced, with him raising Mark with Debbie making him realize the beauty and connection between people. It seems like the best way to convert a Viltrumite would be to ease up their perception of love, but most of them are so unopen to the idea it wouldn't be easy. They're literally a race of people who believe that they should do nothing but be superior to others and kill those weaker. Living in an environment like that changes a person, and I think only through living for an extended period of time in a loving relationship like Nolan will be able to undo all that brainwashing. The quote ends amazingly, with him telling Mark to take the secret to his grave. Luckily, Eve's mental block is broken from her near-death experience, and she burns Conquest really bad before falling back down. Conquest remarks that he must finish the job with Eve, which leads to Mark going berserk. In the heat of the moment, he misplays and allows Conquest to break his remaining arm. As the fight seems hopeless, Mark abandons any humanity that was still inside him and begins crushing Conquest's skull with his own. In another amazingly acted moment by Steven Yeun, Mark asks the incredibly satisfying question of whether or not Conquest is still having fun, if he's still enjoying himself. Seeing Mark give Conquest his comeuppance is great to watch, and it's a conclusion to the fight, and Conquest for now. Mark is left thinking that he killed the Viltrumite, in a battle which he claims changed the way he thinks about killing. He now says that Oliver was right, and that he shouldn't be scared to kill bad people. How this will evolve in the 4th season will remain to be seen, especially because Mark still isn't on Cecil's leash. This introduces me to my last point, which is that Conquest and Mark sort of seem to have rubbed off on each other. Well, in reality, it's harder to tell with Conquest since he's not in a great state, but with Mark, it's easy to see how the Conquest fight impacted him. Especially with the weight of Powerplex and Angstrom still on his shoulders, it will be super interesting to see how this fight affects him in the long term. Regardless, for now, that's all there is to this character. Conquest represents the extreme of the Viltrum ideology. He fights because it's all he's ever known. It's been imprinted on him for so long that it became his personality. He's bloodthirsty and masochistic, but deep down, he's lonely. He's lonely because he doesn't understand the purpose of relationships, and yet he still craves them. He calls Mark's love for Eve useless, and yet he is clearly very affected by the fact that all the other Viltrumites don't like him. He's a more extreme example of Nolan. So extreme, in fact, that I'm unsure that he can be convinced that there is something more to life than killing. I believe that this sort of personality would exist to some degree in anyone who had this much physical capability, even Mark. It's obvious from the fact that there are so many evil Marks that so much power can be dangerous, but I think Debbie did a great job at nipping that in the bud. In fact, one of the most underrated parts of the show is Debbie in the first episode telling Mark to go to bed, to which he says, "Make me," leading to Debbie asking if that made Mark feel strong. It's a moment for Mark really early on that cements his humanity. He grew up for 17 years as a regular human, and even though his powers may have changed his outlook, Debbie was there to keep him grounded from the beginning. However, and I think this goes without saying, a character like Conquest doesn't have a Debbie, and I think it's for that reason that he feels so lonely. Until he can feel a true connection with someone, which may never happen, Conquest will remain the same. But despite the fact that he sees them as useless, Conquest is lonely because the tiniest bit of humanity inside him craves for friends, for relationships. And until he can fully accept that, Conquest will remain alone forever.